We have a great show. I'm real excited. I'm going to talk to a couple of my friends tonight. One of them is Dr. David Jacobs. We're going to be talking to him first for an hour. And I got to tell you, with Dr. David Jacobs, and I'm sure he can hear me right now, but with David, it's very hard to talk to him for just 1 hour. He's a guy that can go on, and you know, you love it because he's extremely interesting. This is when you wish it was television only because if you've ever seen him, he's the most animated man in the world. So when he tells his stories, picture Einstein, kind of Italian, with the hands going in his animation. He's wonderful. Without the hands actually moving, it's more in his face. But wonderful man. I'm looking forward to talking to him about. Because we only have an hour, we're going to basically ask one question to him, and that's going to be, do ETs or hybrids walk amongst us? You're listening to Coast AM. This is Connie Willis with you. Hope everybody's having a good night and ready to hear some really, really cool stuff. Because I'm excited to bring on Mr. David Jacobs. I think there's an M in there. I'm going to guess it's for Michael. The doctor is here. Hey, David, how are you?
Good, and in fact, it is for Michael.
I knew it. Yay! I get points for that, right?
Lots.
I get some, maybe a Chinese dinner from you again. It was fun that you and I went and got some Asian one time. David lives not too far from the studio, so I was hoping to get him here, but I'm just happy to have you on the line. David, I guess we met like 4 to 5 years ago, and here we are now.
Actually. Maybe even a little, well, I guess around that, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, but now, listen, Connie, I know that you have had a many years' experience in radio, so don't sell yourself short.
Did I do that?
No, but I just know that you've had, that you're an experienced.
That's true. I started when I was 3, so I had 15 years of radio in Louisville, Lexington, San Antonio, Orlando, Sarasota, a lot of television, and here I am now getting to do something better than any of all that, and that is talk about this type of stuff on Coast to Coast AM. I'm telling you, this is the dream gig, and David, you're one of my favorite people because I grew up around ghosts and this and that because we had a haunted house. I grew up in a haunted house. We'll go there. But when you've done that, at one point you're so sensitive to things that you want to go on to deeper and deeper things, and those deeper and deeper things where you try to connect the dots, things like ETs, UFOs, hybrids, and that's where you come in. You are the man. Now I think you're like the number one guy with abductions, correct?
Well, I don't know.
Well, let's think about it.
I've devoted my almost entire adult life to studying UFOs. And since I'm 109 years old, that does count.
Yes, I wasn't going to go there. Well, we only have an hour with you. I really wish we had longer because you are just fantastic to talk with. So let's go ahead and let's ask one good, giant question. I know that you've been working on a book lately, and it's either going to be like hybrids, humbrids, something like that. But let's go to the bottom line, and that is, are there hybrids, are there ETs walking amongst us? We know you've studied abductees or contactees, whichever somebody wants to accept, for many, many decades now. Again, you're 109. So with the hour that we have here, tell me, are they walking amongst us?
Well, in fact, I think the title of the new book, which comes out in 2015 sometime in
finally, hello,
December, right? I think if it comes out in December, I just don't hold your breath. Anything can happen. But the title of it right now, as of yesterday, basically, is "Walking Among Us."
Oh, hey, okay, because I know at one point you were going to do hybrids, and then you changed it to humbrids.
Well, hybrids, which is another classification that I have in the book for beings who are, in fact, living among us. I might change it to living among us instead of walking among us, but But that's what people will have to start getting accustomed to if they're interested in this stuff. And I think that the answer is obviously yes. Now, I hate to say that. And even as I say that, there's a sort of wellspring of embarrassment that surges up in me because it's so off the wall. It's so nutty that even though I've spent decades studying this, and I've only come to the conclusion that this is happening relatively recently, within the last 10 years. That's recent for me, but now I have to say yes, that they are living among us. Now, here's the situation that everybody should pay careful attention to. If you think you see a hybrid, the person is not a hybrid.
Ooh, and just to verify to verify for everybody, a hybrid, half ET, half human.
Yeah, an alien with human characteristics. Sometimes there's a hierarchy on board UFOs. There's ones who are at the top, and I believe that those are the insect-like ones, and who are the most alien-looking of all. There is sometimes, but infrequently, reported reptilian-style ones. People make a big deal of that because the word reptile has been ascribed to them, but in fact, they're relatively uncommon. And they do basically what everybody else does. There's no difference in what they do than any other functions of the aliens. Then there's tall gray aliens and small gray aliens. And when people say the word alien, that's what they think of. That's what's made it into movies, into advertising, into the sides of buses, everything.
Right. The big eyes, the big oval-shaped eyes.
Little bodies, gray, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
Then there's what I call early-stage hybrids who look sort of human and sort of alien. They are ugly, very, very thin hair, pointed chins, tiny little noses, but an actual nose, tiny little mouth, but an actual mouth, very thin. Then
David,
yes.
You just described some of the guys I met on Match.com in the past. I just want you to know that. So I haven't met a few of these. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I digress.
It's funny you should say that because that's where they hang out down here. But
I can verify that.
Then there's middle stage hybrids, which look sort of half human and half alien. There's late stage, which look quite human. Maybe the eyes are a little too big. Maybe they don't have any bodily hair. There's human stage ones, which look very human, and there's a few other stages until you get ultimately to what I call human hybrids or hybrids, just hybrids.
Hybrids, okay.
And these hybrids have everybody has a function. This is a very smooth running machine from the insect-like ones all the way down. And they all have their functions. And the function of hybrids, my word, sorry about that, but it clarifies things a little bit. Their function is to live here. And they look absolutely, positively, 100% nondescript. They look average in every way. Therefore, if you see a weird-looking person walking down the street, it's not an alien.
Ah, that's just like your neighbor. Okay.
Right. The weird ones don't make it down. The idea is to blend into society. So if somebody, people write to me all the time, say that they know a hybrid, that they've seen hybrids and this and that. But that would go against what everybody says on the program, and the whole object is to not be seen. is to blend in, is to look normal.
That makes sense.
So the average height, for example, might be 5'9", which is or 5'9.5", which is average for the United States, and they just there's nothing that signifies weirdness about what they look like. So weird people are they're okay. You can be around them. That's fine.
That's hilarious how you put that together, but that makes total sense. So,
well, in the book, there's you'll see how it works out. I've got there's a logic to it.
I'm looking forward to that because I know 3 years ago when I first moved to Philly, you told me you had I guess a couple chapters that you had in your pocket that you carried around with you, and how you put the information in that thumb drive, I guess.
Right.
And you would say, I have this, and I just was waiting for this to come out. And here it is. It's still not out. I'm looking forward to it. But, thank goodness we get to talk about it. But, okay, so there's a hybrid walk, and he looks like some normal person. Is there any way at all I can tell at one point, anyway, is there a vibe? Is there the way they act to where I can kind of be suspect that they might be from somewhere else? And are they born of people, or they come right from the ship?
They come right from the ship. Nobody is born. None of these beings have a birthday. They don't know how old they are.
Interesting.
Because there's no birthday, so they're not sure. And years are not kept. Birthdays are not celebrated. They've never had a birthday party, a birthday cake. They've never had wrapped presents while being on board a UFO. They have not been off board a UFO other than training sessions when they're brought down to have an abductee, teach them what a kitchen is, for example, when they're younger, or what a computer is, or what a television is, or things like that. But they're all very, very naive when they first come down, extremely nice. But see, it's not that they're just humans. They have one characteristic, one just tiny, hardly noticeable difference about them.
Mm-hmm.
They can control humans mentally, and we cannot control them.
Okay, that's subtle. Yes,
Yeah,
that's tiny. Wow,
that is a big one.
Holy cow!
Mind-bogglingly important. It puts them into a different species as opposed to just a different kind of citizen, and it makes us into a kind of lesser species because we don't have that ability.
Without a doubt. So you're saying, okay, let's say a full-blooded ET would have psychic abilities, and a human, some of us humans have some good stuff going on, but you put together a hybrid, an ET and a human, and, you get that perfect hybrid that is allowed to come down here. They're going to look like us, but they're going to have incredible psychic abilities.
Right. Yes. I'm not sure what you mean by psychic abilities, but
telepathy, I guess.
They can control people's behavior and thoughts. I don't think they can tell the future or things like that, but they can control people.
Yeah, they can tell the future enough to know that, hey, in an hour I'm going to make you cook me a nice steak out on the grill. Or I guess they could play around and have a good time, too. So does that mean that do they need money?
This is an excellent question.
Thank you. That's why I'm here. I appreciate that.
They do not need money, but they have learned that they have to have money. In other words, if they walk into a store to buy something, they grab whatever they want and they can simply walk out.
Oh, my.
The person who is watching them behind the counter at a register or something like that will look at them and wave goodbye and be all happy because that person is controlled.
Wow.
But there's so many different levels to this. It gets very complicated. Generally speaking, they are told by abductees that they must have money. They can't just steal things. So the question is, where do they get their money? I do not know that. It could be from abductees. It could be from walking into a bank and asking a teller for money. I don't know.
Right. Wow. Or, maybe they can have, maybe they have access to gold or something like that, and maybe they can exchange it at a pawn shop or somewhere, or take it to one of these gold places and get cash back. No?
That would be complicated.
Oh,
it's
okay.
easier just to have the abductee give them money.
Oh, poor abductee.
Or just go walk into a bank if they know what a bank is.
Even better. Wow. So as well, too, I don't know, I can go into a lot of questions there, so maybe I should go to this before the break. Do we need to be concerned? I mean, why are they here? Do we need to be concerned? Are they friendly?
This is a very, very difficult question to answer. They themselves are friendly. They are nice, they are good, they are kind, all that sort of stuff. Well, maybe not kind, but they're good. I don't know if they can be kind. They've been born and raised by aliens on a UFO. They come down when they're around between 16 and 18, 19 years old.
Oh.
But their lifetime has been spent being taught on how to be a human by abductees on board or else visiting abductees in their homes. But that's not living in the society. That means they're still living on board a UFO. They are not living in a planetary environment where there is a society, let's just assume,
okay,
where different stimulation is going on, where they have a civilization to be a part of.
Do they walk among us? Do they live among us? And we left off with finding out if they are dangerous to us or why they're here. So, David, it's all on you to answer that question. You're the guy.
Well,
pressure.
We don't know why they're here. My sense is that this is a part of what I call planetary acquisition. That this is what we. Well, let me start again. This is a global phenomenon. Now, I don't know whether it's every single country in the world, because I don't know what's going on in Thailand, for example, or some island nation somewhere. I don't know. But I do know that I have gotten reports from around the world and from all continents of people who have abduction symptoms, so to speak. They've had strange and unusual experiences that abductees have in great numbers and non-abductees don't have, basically. And people write to me all the time, every single day, from other countries saying they have been abducted and they remember this and they remember that, and on and on and on. So we know that it is global, and we know it's been going on for quite a long time, back to the late 19th century. There's no evidence whatsoever that it has occurred, and that the program that we are looking at now stretches back to 3000 BC, for example.
Wow.
There's no evidence for that at all. I mean, who knows? What went on in the centuries ago. We don't really know about that stuff. But this particular situation we can date back with a degree of certainty to the late 19th century. And so it's been going on for a while. And now that does not mean that beings have been coming down and living here for a while. That's that's sort of what it has been leading up to. There is a bureaucracy involved with this. There is this is a whole world unto itself. It's the more you learn, the more complicated it is, as it should be, because it should not be just a simple, easy thing, obviously. And that's what's been happening. In other words, we've got a lot of depth about this subject now. But I do think that this is planetary acquisition. And in fact, and here's where I'm going to sound like a total lunatic.
Go ahead. It's okay.
it does sound like this is the process of taking over the planet. There, I said it.
Really?
But for what reasons, we do not know. Do not know. Now, let me just say, I like to say this because this is true. If this were psychological, we'd know. People would just make it up. Just like they're making everything else up because it's all psychological. So they'd say, well, because, there's they like our oceans or they need our water, whatever it is that they would have. But we don't know. We just don't know. The beings, the insect-like beings who are the ones who are directing the program, in my opinion, do not say why they're doing this, and therefore abductees don't know why they're doing it, and therefore I don't know why they're doing it.
And that's where you get your information through hypnosis, and you do this as scientifically as you possibly can by so many people have to say something so many times along the way before you count it as something that is really, truly happening. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. You can't just come in and tell me something that I've never heard and say that, and I expect me to start putting it in books and that sort of thing. This is there's a process whereby something becomes evidence, and it has to be said by other people who are not aware of the evidence. Of the accounts that the previous person has been saying about this subject, and I've heard lots of things that are off the wall that have never been duplicated ever again, and that just lays in my files.
You know what? That would be a good book, David. That would be really a fun one to read. By the way,
part of a training manual for how to do hypnosis.
That's
how to listen to things and how to believe and what not to believe.
Well, David, I've never heard you say that they are going to take over the planet. Is that what you said?
That is new. It is
wow.
New. And the evidence inevitably points to that. I can't get away from the pointing of the evidence. I wish I could. I wish it pointed in a bunch of different directions, but it is, in essence, what they say also to abductees. Soon we'll all be together. Oh. Soon everybody will be happy. Soon everybody will know his place. And there's a lot more than that as well, obviously. Now, we have to talk about hypnosis a little bit here. Okay. Hypnosis is not totally fallacious. It's not totally bogus. Not 100%. That's the best thing you can say about it.
What? Okay.
It has some value. And when I get people just to be relaxed, I'm not a great hypnotist. I'm not going to make people think that they're a chicken and start clucking on the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
So I can't do that. I wish I could do that. That would be fun. But I can't do that. I don't do that sort of stuff. I just relax people and start asking them questions. I go through an induction that I copied basically from Bud, and it's just relaxation. In the books that I'm writing, there will be one person who had a lot of sessions with me, and then she began just to spontaneously remember what was happening to her. And there's a whole bunch of material in the book where it's just straight memory, and it is absolutely accurate, whereas straight memory without hypnosis of any sort, she had a lot of sessions with me in the beginning, straight memory is notoriously inaccurate. So when people say they remember this happening to them and they remember that happening to them, remember this happening and that, generally speaking, when they come to me and say that, I say, well, that's very interesting. Let's take a look at it and see. And 9 times out of 10, they got things wrong. They forgot things. They said things that weren't quite true. They imagined things that didn't happen, and they're a little bit embarrassed about it in the beginning because they were so completely wound up and invested in those thoughts. But they quickly realized that this whole phenomenon is very different than they expected, and their effects on their memory are very different than they expected. And so when people have bleed-through memories of sort of complex events happening to them. You have to be extremely careful. Having said that, I do have this one woman who her testimony is very, very solid. I've known her for about 15 years now, and there's other things too. I've worked with only 150 people, which is not that many, but a few of these people I've worked with for decades, and so I can see change over time. And,
because you see them happening as a child being abducted. That's usually what happens. It happens in generation after generation, and then at one point they go through the hybridization part, and all the sexual stuff going on, so that they can make these hybrids, and then it goes into where they start learning how to live like us from the abductees.
Right, the ones whose
where you're at now.
Right, that's what I'll be writing about, and the ones whose function is to live here are obviously the important ones, because that is the whole reason for the program. Now you have to remember, when you say is it good for us or bad for us, just keep this one concept in mind that is irrefutable. If you believe that there is such a thing as UFOs and aliens and all that, if you want to come into my bizarre world and sort of go along with that, the one irrefutable statement that I can make is that this is a clandestine phenomenon. It is secret. People are made to forget what happened to them seconds after it happens to them, and everybody is in agreement about that. If this exists, it is clandestine. And the reason it is secretive is they don't want us to know what they're doing.
Right, so that's why you don't. Right.
That's why you don't, but there is a reason why they don't want us to know what they're doing. It's not for our benefit. If it was for our benefit, they'd be happy to tell us. But it is not for our benefit. It is for their benefit. And
you have to have a theory, though, right?
Well, no, I do think that this is planetary acquisition, but I don't know why. I you can guess,
Well, tell me your guess. No, tell me your guess.
Well, I'm just in the book. I throw out some guesses. Maybe they want resources. Maybe there's some sort of geopolitical situation where with civilizations who control more planets have more power. You don't know. It's just taking questions out of the air. Really, there's no evidence for why. We don't know the why.
And if they wanted to totally take over too, they could just zap us out and move forward. But they do want to blend in with us, so it doesn't seem too terribly awful right now.
Not now. Time is on their side also, but they don't want us to know what they're doing. Now, secrecy suggests that they might have a weakness.
Oh.
That if it wasn't secret, if everybody knew and everybody accepted the fact, they might be in danger in some way.
That makes sense.
The amount of people who have studied the abduction phenomenon compared to the population of the world would be, let's just say, small. So there's only a handful of people who have studied this subject, really, and the academic and scientific community is not. It's not that they're just not interested. That would be wonderful. That would be a huge victory for abduction researchers if they're not interested. They are not only not interested, but they're aggressively hostile to the subject. They are ridiculing. These scientists ridicule as well. I mean, they're so far removed from it. But these people are smart people. They're one hell of a lot smarter than I am, I'll say that. And if a lot of intelligent people got together and seriously studied this subject, they might be able to come up with some kind of way to stop it. That is my theory, and that theory is wrong. And the reason it's wrong because most people don't know that they're abductees. And it's global in nature.
Okay, let me ask you this. if something's going to happen, whenever it is going to happen, and it sounds like soon, does anybody win here? Are the abductees who have taught these creatures everything, and where, they've been an abductee all their life, and their mothers and fathers or whoever, because it goes down in generations, by studying what you have studied and found. So does anybody win? Is anybody better off when these things take over?
Yes. The insect-like beings.
Well, do the abductees get an award or anything for helping at all, or they go down in the ship as well? I mean, you know what I mean. Yeah,
I don't know. I do not know what the end game is. I don't know how it's going to be played out in the end. There's that has not been told to me yet. Now, if I had another 100 years to live, and if I had all the energy and all the money in the world to keep doing this research with intensity, I might find out. It's possible, because when you read this new book that will be published by Hampton Roads Press, you'll find out that everything that I've written here has a logic to it. It's all logical. This is a rigidly logical phenomenon. But in fact, they're only doing it because it benefits them. They don't particularly care about us one way or the other. So it's got to benefit somebody. They're not doing it just to pass the time.
You'll want to stick around for my conversation with C.J. Romer, paranormal researcher and member of the ASSAP. That's the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena. You may find it stimulating and, dare I say, shocking. Sorry, that's low-hanging fruit. I had to do it. Coming up next, when you think of the austere and esteemed Oxford University, you might think of some of its famous graduates: T.S. Eliot, Oscar Wilde, C.S. Lewis, Stephen Hawking, Indira Gandhi, Benazir Bhutto, Theresa May. Had any of these students attended a certain lecture by an Oxford professor back in 2012, I can't imagine how they would have reacted. Some may have stormed out. Some might have snickered derisively. Some may have stayed right to the end and asked pointed questions. The topic of that lecture, now this is Oxford University, remember, was that bug-like aliens walk among us, and they're having very close encounters with humans, interbreeding, in fact, to create a new hybrid species that could one day save Earth from climate change and other disasters. Dr. Young-Hae Chi is an instructor in Korean at Oxford's Oriental Institute, and he's coming up next. Dr. Chi, welcome to Coast AM. How are you, sir?
Well, good. I'm very honored to be invited by you and have opportunity to talk to your audience. I'm very grateful for that.
Let me go back to 2012, and I want to ask you why you delivered that lecture, given you're a language instructor, correct?
Exactly.
Right. So what would lead a language instructor, someone who is on the faculty of the Oriental Studies at Oxford University, to lecture about aliens?
Well, before I answer to your question, may I make a small statement? I'm doing this interview entirely in a private capacity, not in the capacity of a member of Oxford University, where I'm teaching at the moment. So I want to make it clear that any views, arguments, or opinions expressed here are entirely my own and do not represent any opinions of the university in any way. Well, I'm
Understood.
not quite sure whether the university has any opinions on this issue. Anyway, that's what I want to make it clear.
All right, understood. Thank you.
Yeah. To your question, why did I deliver that speech in 2012? Well, I mean, the question of whether aliens are visiting us, it doesn't belong to any academic discipline. So anybody can look at that issue. So, and personally, I've been looking at this issue for the last 20 years as a kind of a matter of private hobby. So I presented my findings in my Amash 2012 speech. Amash is a kind of mutual support group among UK abductees. So it was purely from my personal interest in this very important issue.
Right. And the title of the lecture was Alien Abduction and the Environmental Crisis.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Right. Now, what was the reaction at Oxford? Did they have an opinion one way or the other? Were they concerned? Were they amused? How did they react?
Well, there was no reaction because it was delivered not in Oxford, but was in a town called Nottingham, and it was not noticed very much by the university. And even if the university had heard anything about it, I don't think the university had any official opinion about that because I was delivering the speech in a private capacity. So, well, I would be interested in hearing how the university would react. So far, there's been no reaction about that.
Since that lecture, I mean, I think fairly recently, though, you were asked to speak with the newspaper, the Oxford Student, regarding your theory. Correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And since that publication, has there been any other further reaction?
Well, the publication of the news, I have more reaction from abroad. I'm abroad outside the UK than inside the UK, and there's no reaction yet from the university. But the university has asked me to basically separate my activity from my formal teaching in the university. So I agreed to do that. So far there's been no kind of interaction between me and the university.
All right, so let's get to the hypothesis here, or there are hypotheses several. The idea that we are, and many people would agree, undergoing some sort of an environmental crisis here on the planet, and that there is a connection or a correlation between the environmental degradation that is going on planet Earth and encounters with aliens, whether we're talking about abductions or other types of alien encounters, correct?
Yes.
So let's talk about let me get you to elaborate on your views about, for example, the types of aliens that we are interacting with. You say there are 4 types. Let's talk about those to begin with.
Well, I just chose 4 types as most frequently reported types. And I heard also from my research subjects, those abductees, about other types as well. But most frequently reported types are those, one, insect-like alien, which is quite, in many cases, menacing, particularly to female abductees. That's what I hear again and again from UK abductees and French abductees and German abductees. So it seems there's a certain commonality between abductees' experiences about the characteristics of those insect-like aliens. And secondly, it is common, very common gray aliens. I'm sure you know about this. Most of my research subjects report about seeing gray aliens, small gray aliens standing by their bedroom. And slightly tall gray aliens when they go to, when they are abducted into the UFO. They see them. And also reptilians, but it's relatively is rare to see reptilians, but occasionally they see reptilians moving around or standing together with small aliens. So these are the four types most frequently observed. But there are also slightly varied humanoid forms. There's also the human-looking aliens inside the UFOs. They also report them.
Now, what led you to conclude that the purpose of these encounters, and we'll talk about, in addition to the abductions, some of the experimentation perhaps is going on, but what led you to conclude that these encounters are connected to things like climate change or environmental degradation?
Well, the first conclusion I made was UFOs really exist, and they are driven by intelligent beings. Intelligent beings here, I mean non-human intelligent beings. And the question I asked was, why are they coming to us? And there must be a reason. I mean, intelligent beings act not purposelessly, they act with purpose. And what do they want from us? And the second observation is they abduct human beings and they do some kind of biological experimentation, and they seem to be clearly producing some kind of hybrid. Then why are they doing this? And I noticed that the timing of their appearance, well, obviously there are a number of evidences that they visited humanity prior to mid-20th century. But I think in terms of statistics, they began to visit us massively from mid-20th century. There is around the 1940s, 1950s. The time happens to be when we began to have problems with our environment. We began to emit CO2 massively into our atmosphere, and we began to see catastrophic impact of what we are doing on our ecosystem. So I could see some kind of clear correlation between the two, and also it's around the time when we began to invent massive destructive weapons like nuclear weapons. That is around 1940s and 50s. So this kind of ominous developments were actually, they happened when we have massive reports of UFOs and aliens coming to us. And not only that, if you interview abductees, they frequently report about aliens warning to them about the impending demise of humanity, because we are not looking after our planet properly. For example, you may have heard about the UFO landing incident near Ariel Primary School in Gua, Zimbabwe. I think that happened in 1994.
Oh, this was witnessed by the school children.
Exactly, about
right.
62 school children. And one of them was given a telepathic message about the future of humanity. I mean, what the child heard from the one of the two aliens standing around the UFO was the world will have no trees and will have no fresh air to breathe, because and all the trees will die because of the catastrophic consequence of the environmental crisis and climate change. And this kind of reports are from everywhere. I heard so many times from the abductees about this impending demise of our ecological system. So given all these clear developments, I made a conclusion that the visitation of alien intelligence to us has something to do with what we are doing to ourselves, the potential self-destruction and the potential destruction of the environmental system here.
One of your conclusions... Sorry, thank you. One of your conclusions, Dr. Chi, was that there is a hybrid, a human-alien hybrid program going on. What did you base that conclusion on? Just the reports of abductees? Did you rely on, let's say, some of the work of Dr. David Jacobs? How did you arrive at that?
Both. I have my own research with the UK, with the British abductees in German and French. And also I heard, although the number of cases is relatively small, I heard the same thing from Japanese women. These hybrid projects seems to be common. And I also have been working with Dr. David Jacobs, and we discussed about this. We also had a regression hypnosis with the UK abductees here in Britain, and we heard the same thing. So it's from both research results from my colleague and also my own. And of course, the aliens may have other projects. They seem to be taking animals for some kind of biological genetic experimentation, but I do not know what they are doing with the animals, but clearly manipulating with human genes and production of hybrids is clearly one of their major goals, I suppose.
The question would be, well, how do they feel, the aliens, how do they rationalize that creating alien-human hybrids will somehow affect the environment or improve the environment? What is the relationship between the hybrid program and the environment?
Well, the fact that they are producing hybrids is what I would like to say. I'm quite confident about that. About the relationship between the production of hybrids and the environmental threat is really a conjecture. It's purely a speculation, and I need to look at this issue more in detail. I'm collecting more evidences to have any clear idea about this. But you can think of three possibilities. But firstly, you have to ask, now, where are all they? Those hybrids produced so far, because we don't see them around us. Although Dr. Jacob is arguing that they are actually working among us, but I haven't heard any reports from my research subjects about that. So I left it undecided. So I have to actually look at more in detail about that. But you can actually hypothesize three scenarios. One, they may have transferred those hybrids to another planet or another space. Why?
Dr. Chi, pardon the interruption. We're gonna step away. We'll revisit these three hypotheses when we come back. Dr. Chi, Oxford University professor, who says aliens are among us and they are here to help save us from environmental degradation. We'll take a time out. Peter Gabriel taking us into the break with Salisbury Hill here on Coast to Coast AM. Sitting in for George Knapp and coming to you live from Coast's Toronto, Canada affiliate In-Depth Radio News Talk 1010. Say hello on Twitter at Richard Syrett, S-Y, because I love you, R-E-T-T. Earlier this week, Victor Veskovo became the first underwater explorer to reach the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean, the Mariana Trench. His submersible reached a record-breaking depth of 7 miles below the surface when it risked possible implosion had equipment malfunctioned. Vescovo spent 4 hours exploring the bottom of the trench and recording video, and you can see some of that video in the highlight carousel up at coasttocoastam.com. And we will come back with more of my conversation with Professor Chi from Oxford University as we continue to discuss alien visitations and the end of humanity right here on Coast to Coast AM. We are back with Dr. Young-Hae Chi, professor at Oxford University's Oriental Studies Institute, and he says extraterrestrials are here, they walk among us, and they're having very close encounters with humans. In fact, interbreeding with us, creating alien-human hybrids, and he says there is a strong correlation between this activity and climate change. And you began to tell us about these three hypotheses you have as to why they are creating hybrids. Go ahead.
Yes, let me continue. So the first scenario is just to create hybrids in order to preserve our DNA and transfer those hybrids to another planet. That is one scenario. I don't think this is perhaps feasible, because I don't think the aliens really want to give up this planet. And there is a reason that I think in this way. I don't believe aliens are from far away stars in our galaxy or in our universe, and I think they are living together with us next to us. That's why I believe aliens are not really giving up human species. The second scenario may be the hybrids are produced as a problem solver. They might massively reveal their identity at a critical moment when we really need somebody else's help to solve our own problem. If this scenario is to be true, then we must assume the hybrids must be in possession of exceptional skills, intelligence, and perhaps even ability to garner respect from human species, because they must act as a leader, as a problem solver. One small problem with this scenario is by now we must be seeing that kind of group emerging among us, but we don't see them not yet. Well, they may be working among us, but we have to have clear evidence about that. The third scenario is perhaps the hybrids are a new species. I don't know whether we can call them human species or whatever. We have been creating all these problems to our planet. Human beings are emotional, impulsive, greedy, irrational, and prone to war and destruction. So perhaps the aliens are producing these hybrids as a kind of a new species who will occupy the Earth. And they may have greater adaptability to harsher environmental conditions so that they can survive better than present human species. Perhaps aliens are doing this, replacing the existing human species with the new ones very silently. Imagine, we all know the scientists have been replacing the existing type of corns with genetically modified corns. We might be phased out, when I said we as a present human species, might be phased out gradually and silently and replaced by these new species. So the third scenario is also feasible, and perhaps personally I believe the third scenario is what is happening. But as I said at the very beginning, this is all pure speculation.
Right.
So we need to wait to see more evidence about this.
So let me just recap and then sort of drill down on each of these hypotheses. So one possibility is that they find our DNA valuable for the preservation of the stock. perhaps of their stock as well. Perhaps, in other words, together, the hybrid will be better suited to survive, the changing climate and so forth. Second,
well, the first one is okay, good, yeah.
Okay. Secondly, they want to create a species that has greater as a problem solver and perhaps even greater moral capacity.
Yes.
So that we will start treating the planet better.
Well, the first one, hybrids are perhaps have been already transported to another planet, and aliens have a plan to give up this planet. The second one is hybrids are designed to solve the problem at a critical moment in the future.
Right.
Thirdly, hybrids are replacing the existing human species. So they will occupy this planet as a new resident of this planet. And they may have a greater adaptability to harsh environmental conditions. And that they are the gist of the three scenarios.
Now, if they are interested in preserving humankind, but only as in a hybrid form, why don't they just simply, if they have greater intelligence, if they have the technology, why don't they simply solve the problem, holus bolus, without all of this interaction and hybridization? Why do they need to interbreed if they have the technology to simply solve the problem on their own?
Well, that's very interesting but very difficult question to answer. But this space is occupied by human species. They occupy different space. They can't do anything on our behalf. So things must be perhaps done by us or by somebody that can fill in this space. When I said this space is this Earth space, and this is much more complex than it appears to be. They seem to be occupy a neighboring space. I don't think they are from far away, really, stars in far away in our galaxy or in our universe. There is, I believe, a kind of a space where we can't reach because we don't see them. We don't have any ability to reach their space. It is not a kind of a mysterious fifth dimension, the kind that other UFO researchers have been talking about, or scientists have been talking about. But it is extension of our third dimension space, as if we can't reach, or fish in the oceans cannot reach our land, although it is connected. Our space is bordered with their space, but we can't go there, although they can come into our space with UFOs. So different species occupy different spaces, and the problems we have created in this space should be solved in our own way, following our own physical laws and dimension laws. So they can't directly solve our problems from their space. They must have something. They must produce somebody, some agents who can solve this problem.
I think you referred to this as the comprehensive biosphere theory, the idea that we share this biosphere with them. As you say, they are not extraterrestrials in the sense that they are coming from some far distant galaxy to interact with us. They are here. They are breathing the same air. They are being negatively impacted by the climate change. That's why they are choosing to act. And you're saying that we can't see them because we are limited by our sensory perception.
Yes, exactly, yes.
Dr. Chi, would you be willing to take a call or two from our listeners?
Pardon?
Would you be willing to take some phone calls, questions and comments from listeners?
Well, yes, definitely, yes.
All right. Why don't we do that then? We'll start with Brenda is checking in from New Mexico. Brenda, good evening. Welcome to Coast AM.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Fascinating show tonight.
Well, thank you.
I have a comment for you, Dr. Chi, if you'd consider something. This correlates so well with the Bible interchangeably about chapter 6 in Genesis, where the 200 fallen angels came down, took humans as wives, and they interbred with them as well as changing plant and animal DNA, and interchangeably at that too. And so then it also says in Genesis chapter 6, as in the days of Noah, so shall the last days be. And I really believe that these things are walking among us. There are reptilian lines. It talks about that in the Bible too. And I wanted to know what your thoughts on all this is.
So I couldn't hear you clearly towards the end. You want to know, could you say that again, please?
I would like to know what your thoughts on that scenario, that instead of...
On the Bible.
Yes, that these are actually maybe more of an angelic, the fallen angels, instead of the aliens as we might be looking at.
Well, I have been trained as a theologian. The problem with the account of the sons of fallen angels having a relationship with human females, human daughters, we can see that kind of myth almost everywhere, not only in the Middle Eastern myth, but also in the Far Eastern, because it seems to me the human society has some kind of passion for finding, the root of their existence in a heavenly kind of, connection. So you see the interbreeding between human beings and heavenly beings, whether they are fallen or good, are actually very universal around the world. So whether that interbreeding of fallen angels and the human daughters is historical or not, there's no way to check it. It is as a kind of archetypal model is possible, but I don't connect. I don't include all those biblical accounts of what happened a long time ago into my research because it's not possible to test it and to prove it. So I just want to take it as a story.
Brenda, thank you for that. Dr. Chi, if somehow humanity is able to come together and avert or ameliorate some of this environmental degradation, would you then suspect or expect to see further, let's say, UFO activity, further abductions?
Well, I mean, if I strictly follow my theory, then it should stop or lessen the frequency of their visitation. But we have not only environmental problems, but also political crisis. The problems we face is huge. Really, is a collapse of the whole social, political, economic, environmental system. It is all interconnected. I'm not quite sure whether we have any ability to rectify this problem, whether we have ability to return the whole things to pre-industrial revolution level of kind of stability. So I don't think we can solve this problem, and the aliens' activities will continue to be seen around us.
So it's not only environmental degradation, they're also concerned about nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons, and hasn't always with us. The nuclear threat has gone away, never even a second from us. So really, the future is not that bright.
I've always wondered about this because I'm familiar with reports of UFO incursions over nuclear sites in the United States, nuclear bases and so forth. But I've always wondered, where were the aliens when the United States dropped bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945? Why didn't they interact or intercede there?
Well, frankly, I don't have any answer to the question, but perhaps they leave things to us. I don't think they want to directly intervene in one or two particular cases of a crisis. They might want to devise a systematic approach. In other words, they might want to change the whole system, whole basis, biological basis of our civilization. I mean, just intervening in one or two particular cases may not solve the problem. The humanity will continue to do foolish things to ourselves. So that may not be a solution. I mean, they may have entirely different, very big picture as a kind of solution, like replacing the present human species by new ones.
Let me try to work Brian in here from Indianapolis very quickly. Brian, we've just got about a minute here. Quickly, please.
Hey, good evening, guys. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure.
I had a question for your guest there. We're talking about modern-day aliens, but we've had alien or some type of being from the sky all the way back at the dawn of time. So if it's environmental related, why were they back then? And the frequency doesn't seem to have increased any, other than reporting through, internet and that kind of stuff.
Brian, good question. I'm going to get Dr. Chi in here just because we're tight on time, but thank you for the question. Dr. Chi, has it intensified, the interaction?
I think so. I mean, if you look at the records in the past, you see their visitation, but it is not that frequent. I mean, the frequency of visitation is remarkable from the mid-20th centuries, around the 1940s and 50s. So we see clear kind of division in terms of frequency. So that's why I'm relating the alien visitation with what began to happen from the 20th century, which is nuclear weapons invention and then environmental problems.
Dr. Chi, how do people get a hold of Alien Visitations and the End of Humanity? I understand that was written in Korean. Is it also available in English?
No, it is not yet translated. So it is now being rewritten. It was co-authored. So I'm rewriting, taking the gist of the book, and with some new findings since then. I mean, it was published about 4 years ago.
All right. Dr. Chi, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I hope we'll talk again.
Thank you.
Here is Dr. Boylan. Doctor, welcome.
Art, how are you doing?
I'm just great, thank you. And yourself?
I'm doing well.
Good.
And it's really a pleasure to have you back on the air. I consider you the foremost person in alternative broadcasting.
Oh, thank you. All right, well, Doctor, for most people, the concept of visitation of any form is rough. The concept of interaction between humans and aliens is very difficult for them to believe. And then the idea of hybrids, of mixing and matching and then having these mixes and matches walking among us, that's really a rough one. And I'd like to know how you came to the conclusion firmly in your mind, and you must have a deductive scientific mind, that it is so.
Well, I didn't get there quickly or easily. I started the research into people who've had encounters with the star visitors back in '89, and that was as a result of certain people that year starting to come to me with their accounts of their contacts by the star visitors. And I knew these were sound people, upstanding citizens in the community and not lunatics. and I got involved. It drew me in, the curiosity about this phenomenon and learning more about it.
There's a lot of separating of the wheat and the chaff there, though, isn't there? I mean, there are, frankly, people who either want to believe or are delusional or, whatever. I mean, there's got to be that category.
Oh, yeah. I would say I've worked with over 400 experiencers of such contacts now. And I would say about 5% are of the people who step forward and say they have these contacts are seriously mentally ill.
That's very low.
Yeah, and there's an additional percentage, which I would find hard at the moment to quantify, of people who are sort of wannabes or take unusual circumstances and run too far with them.
Gotcha.
And decide they've had an alien encounter, as they might say it. And once you move those folks aside, there's still probably a solid 80% of the folks I've dealt with that whose accounts stand up in rigorous kinds of tests of whether they're the truth.
All right. What is that process? I mean, I guess you can't give it all away, but generally, what is the process? How do you validate?
Well, first I check for their mental soundness. As a psychologist, by education and training and many decades of experience, I know the signs to look for in that department. Then I look for the details of their account of what happened. By now I have accumulated enough experience working with accounts that I know the various races involved, their behavioral patterns, the kinds of messages they give, the kind of craft they come in, typical durations of encounters, and a lot of details, right down to some of the insignia and uniforms and so forth. And when somebody gets too far out away from this and makes up stuff that neither I nor Dr. John Mack nor Dr. Leo Frankel or any of the other, shall we say, heavyweight people with lots and hundreds of cases under their belt, and good scientific advanced training, when they get outside of, probably between the three of us, we probably have anywhere between 1,500 and 3,000 case database. Now, you figure that's a pretty good sample of everything that's going on. And when you get outside of that with a story that's way out in left field from that, then I begin to think that this person may be making it up.
All right. What about this? If there were really hybrids here, then I would guess that there would be a genetic giveaway. I mean, we've unraveled the human genome for the most part. And I know that, we can look at it. The police have labs, and they can make all kinds of determinations about your genetic makeup. So if we actually had hybrids here, shouldn't they be genetically detectable as such?
Well, yes and no. Let me tell you the yes and the no of that. We're still working on human genome analysis. It turns out there are some variations just because of peoples from different parts of the planet have some variations that some people like to call race, but it's really more layered than that.
Okay.
So the human genome is not nailed down absolutely 100% yet. Granted that it's fairly well nailed down, the challenge in detecting non-human genes, I would estimate in these star kids and adult star seeds for that matter, the extraterrestrial component, the extraterrestrial genes in their overall makeup, chromosomal package, genome, perhaps is something on the order of 15 to 30%. It's not like a 50-50.
Okay. But even so,
the problem with that is we, the lab scientists doing a genome analysis, has to know what extraterrestrial genes look like, the genome, to kind of do a side-by-side with the standard human genome and see where these hybrids deviate. But the trouble is that the genome of certain extraterrestrial races has been worked, but all of that is extremely classified and denied in government labs. Dr. Michael Wolff, that I've associated with before his death, indeed worked on just such work and indicated the government had been at it for decades before.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Dr. Michael Wolff with the National Security Council Special Studies Group, what some people used to call MJ-12.
And so you're telling me the alien genetic makeup, in other words, they've unraveled some of its mysteries.
Yes, they've gotten samples from cadavers of star visitors in crashed craft that have been retrieved, plus some tissue samples. All it takes is a swab of the inside of your mouth from living star visitors, typically a volunteer scientist consultant working side by side with human scientists in these classified labs, trying to pass on some high technology. So they've analyzed several, but the trouble is, if you're inside such a classified facility and have the extraterrestrial genome side by side with the human to see where the deviations are, then you can do that. What you say is perfectly correct. Theoretically, it should be possible to just see how much in a hybrid kid, for example, is human and how much is extraterrestrial genes. But
yeah, I'm not a geneticist, but I mean, would a geneticist, in your view, be able to look at a hybrid's genetic makeup and say, aha, would it stand out like that? You're saying no, that it's more layered?
Well, I'm not a geneticist either, but my inference from talking to Dr. Wolff, who's done these kinds of side-by-side studies, is that there's only a few places on a few genes where the deviations occur, and we know now that it doesn't take but a few changes or differences in certain parts of genes to make some profound differences in the way a person looks and operates.
I'm told we're just that close to, gorillas, I guess?
Well,
apes?
Chimps were about, I think, 98%.
98%.
And dolphins to a very high level, too, which is another story we'll get into maybe during our time. But without that classified extraterrestrial genome information, the civilian labs out in the open can't make those side-by-side analyses.
Okay. Do you have any indication, any idea of, we talk about indigo children, star children, and that's been going on. That talk has been going on for years. Presumably the process has been going on for years, so we might have some star adults by now, or even more. Do you know where we are with that?
Well, yeah. I use the label star seeds for the adults and star kids for the juveniles. And star seed adults are basically either star kids who've grown up, or in some cases, an adult has an encounter with the visitors, and they do a little tweaking of the person's physiology and genetics, maybe, and they're transformed by that way. Now, how many of the population are that? I couldn't say definitively in my estimate, looking at the numbers of people I've dealt with, the number of people who've had encounter experiences and have been physically changed by those, and we can talk in a minute about some of those physical changes. The Roper poll estimated 1 or 2% of the population. Let's be very conservative and say 1/4 of the population have had an encounter with a star visitor or more during their lifetime.
Yes.
That would still be, in the U.S., several millions of people.
Yes.
And as I get, this whole star kid, starseed stuff is real cutting edge. That's why even people who are kind of in the mainstream of ufology scratch their heads at this and say, I've not heard about this. But the impression I get from the many cases I've talked to is that a fair number of these people who've had encounters have been transformed. And what I've noticed even more is that the kids they have are transformed. Are many of their kids are star kids in the sense that they have this profile of a large number of quite advanced characteristics that make them stand out from the average human.
The whole abduction phenomenon has been reproductively oriented. No question about it.
I personally, in my research, find that to be a bit overblown in terms of some of the more physical processes, but certainly a number of people have had, let's run a kind of typical case. You know, a thin pipette may be either inserted in their body or run through their abdominal cavity down in.
Yes.
Some reproductive material is borrowed, and what it looks like to me from the after effects is that reproductive material is taken somewhere, a little gene splicing done to splice in some extraterrestrial advanced characteristics and put back, then the reproductive material is put back in the person, and they go on to have kids that look very normal, except they have these cluster of advanced abilities. And I draw the conclusion that there's been some genetic engineering going on and that these kids are hybrid because not only are these characteristics enduring, but it appears that the characteristics get handed down from one generation to another. So it looks like it's kind of permanently enshrined in the genome.
Well, you know, Doctor, if all you say is so, then this is an invasion.
Well, that's a term.
It's a word.
What I see going on is a transformation. That's another word.
Uh-huh. And you think that their intention is a benign one? That they're trying to help us with this?
Yeah. And let me, as long as we're blowing people's minds, let's finish the job here. I want to put this in a little historical perspective because the typical take on the star visitor phenomenon is that, you know, one of their ships wandered around, crashed in 47, and they've been coming back ever since. This is a very telescope kind of vision of what contact between the nations out there and Earth has been like over time. The indigenous peoples all over the Earth hold in their oral traditions origin from the stars and the star people. And the star people say that same thing to people that they meet with currently, in the last 50 years. The indications are also from anthropology that there is discontinuity in the evolution picture of primates to man, the missing link problem, if you will.
Sure.
Based on all of this information, the picture that emerges is that and from things like the Sumerian tablets that Zechariah Sitchin has translated, that the visitors came here millennia ago, and far from the star kids being their first bit of genetic engineering, the entire human race is their first bit of genetic engineering on Earth.
You believe that to be so?
Yes. That approximately 275,000 years ago, the mitochondrial research done by geneticists tracing back all humans alive today to a common maternal ancestor pegged it about 275,000 years ago to a common woman mother, if you will, in Africa, from which we're all descended. There is no clear predecessor for Homo sapiens. Neanderthal is not our predecessor, even though there were some Neanderthals hulking around in those days. And certainly Lucy and some of the other more primitive primates do not look anything like Homo sapiens. We essentially emerged without a immediate predecessor species about that time. And then the anthropologists, archaeologists tell us that there was another kind of sudden uptick in human development about 130,000 years ago when Homo sapiens became Homo sapiens much less of a primitive kind of forehead, a larger brain case, and looking very much like we look today. And I would argue that that represented a second phase of bioengineering, genetic engineering, gene splicing by the visitors at that point when they saw that the earlier model was still pretty primitive. What is going on now, to jump forward from 130,000 years ago to the present time, is that Homo sapiens sapiens was a pretty good model. We've come up from the Stone Age. We've done art, technology, language, culture, music, etc. There's much good to be said about the human achievement to this point, but there are also some distressing features, such as you've alluded to, and I have. There's still too much territoriality, warlike tendencies. In the old days, we settled arguments by putting a stone axe in the forehead of the other guy. Now we do it with weapons of mass destruction. I'm not sure that's a huge improvement in human functioning. And it is pretty evident from what Star Visitor told people and from looking at the pattern of things that they decided we need yet another upgrade from AOL 1 to AOL 9.0, if you will. And so we over first, several decades back, some new model came in, but in my research into the phenomenon, around the end of the 80s, they started pouring in, and now there's an avalanche of these new type humans coming in, star kids, if you will.
Do you, Doctor, never have moments where you get concerned about people like David Jacobs and the things they say? In other words, that you've bought into this, but you could possibly be wrong regarding the ultimate motivation.
No, David Jacobs is an historian. He's really not, he doesn't have any behavioral science background. He's not a psychologist, a psychiatrist. I would argue that the only evidence we have of star visitor contact is what people who they've contacted say, and the proper experts to be dealing with people who've been contacted are the behavioral science professionals.
Yes, indeed.
Psychologists that work with people can tell truth from falsehood, mental illness and emotional disturbance from reality, and are professionally trained enough not to be amateurs in hypnosis, not to...
However, even occasionally the experts are fooled.
That's much less likely than people that have no training at all. And within all the behavioral science community, and by that I include the many hundreds of people in the Academy of Clinical Close Encounter Therapists and John Mack's Program for Extraordinary Experience Research. These aren't just a handful of therapists and psychologists, psychotherapists, so forth, but these are hundreds of folks,
indeed,
in a number of places in the world who have a consensus on what this is about. So this is not just my prejudice or Leo Sprinkles or John Max. This is hundreds of people who've got a consensus about what this is about.
Yes, that's very true. But again, we only know so much about this, and it may well be that somebody who is our manipulator, or a group that would be our manipulators, could have motives that we don't yet fully understand. That has to be allowed for as at least a possibility. For example, we do seem to be a really neat planet. When you look back on planet Earth, it does seem, unlike so many others, really green. Lots of good oxygen still, no matter what we've done. Lots of nice water and minerals, and it's a pretty decent place compared to most of what you see out there, and maybe it's prized real estate.
Well, I think that's, with all due respect, a kind of an Earth-centered viewpoint.
True.
There are billions and billions of stars out there with planets revolving around them, and the idea that Earth is a rare, unique, is something not held any longer by the astronomical community. Furthermore, the star visitors have the kind of technology to conform planets to livable conditions even when they're not currently found that way, as is currently going on with Mars. Even in the last several decades, Mars is starting to develop atmosphere and thicken up, and other changes, developing life patterns seasonally that in earlier decades astronomers did not see happening on there. The fading and coming of green with the seasons.
Since you mentioned Mars,
Yes.
it's quite something right now with the lander there and everything. Do you think there once was some sort of civilization on Mars in a day when it had a thick atmosphere and lots of water flowing on the surface and all the rest of it? Would that be your impression?
Dr. Wolf says that is the case, and it certainly looks like, what Richard Hoagland has said. The Cydonia complex is clearly not natural land features. It's artificial.
Indeed, it would seem so.
But the presence of life on there is contemporaneous. It's not dusty and eons ago. They're actively at work up there, changing Mars to make it more inhabitable, thickening up atmosphere and so forth. And you've got to marvel at the kind of people who have the technology to take on a whole planet and change its ecosystems to greater livability. And the point I was leading to in all of that is the kind of paranoid, if you'll pardon my expression, a scenario that sees them as evil, mean invaders is ridiculous on two counts. Number one, they were here before we were, and they bioengineered us. It doesn't make any sense to think of them as invaders.
I suppose not.
And then number two, they not only do they have access to the millions of habitable planets out there, but they have the technology to take a marginal planet and tighten up the atmosphere to where it's breathable and has enough pressure to hold down liquid water on the surface. In other words, create conditions for life. So it's not like they're, got a can with a bunch of pencils in their hand coming here saying, pretty please, can we have some of your real estate? That's just too earthbound and narrow a view of what's going on out there.
Well, all right. If they were our fathers, if they bioengineered us in the first place and have been guiding us since with changes, then what about, I mean, we are imagining them to be so far ahead of us that they are our creators. That's a long way ahead of us.
Well, let's say they're the handmaidens of creation.
The handmaidens of creation. Well, okay. That may be safer. Anyway, why haven't they done a better job? I mean, we do seem to be going down a track right now that's just way out of control. So their control has been pretty loose at best.
Yes. Well, again, the Jacobs idea that they're coming here in jackboots to run a prison camp is not the evidence at all. They come with a sense of collegiality and respect of one intelligent, conscious, spiritual life form for another, even though they may be ahead of us technologically, that they don't culturally take the point of view that therefore that entitles them to take over and declare martial law and kick us in the butt and run the place. They clearly could do that, but they choose not to because they respect the fact that the indigenous life form, namely humans on this planet, need to find our way, and only when things get drastic, as they are getting now, where were sitting on the, with nukes on the end of intercontinental rockets aimed at each other.
The very edge of abyss, yes.
And as you know, the cascade of environmental degradation on Earth is such that the Rio de Janeiro conference, the scientists said, you keep up the way you're going, and by 2025, the cascade will be unstoppable.
Yes.
So those are emergency conditions, and so they're stepping in and showing up in people's bedrooms at night and saying, we need to have a word here. And they're also trying to upgrade the genetics to make us a more peaceable, metaphysically aware, sensitive people that are not going to kill each other or kill off the Earth.
But it's not going so well now. In other words,
the star kids and the star seeds are not the majority of the population at this point. But having worked with them, I would tell you, if those folks were the majority population, we would not have wars, we would not have environmental degradation. I've seen these kids wince at the thought of pollution going on. Some of them, practically have conniptions if their parents don't recycle cans and glass. They are very attuned to the environment. And, fights in the schoolyard, not only are they not part of them, they're appalled by the whole idea that people would deal with differences by physical force.
Well, the way the world and our country is structured, for example, right now, until they get to be representatives, senators, even into the White House, until they get into power, the way things go around here, there's not going to be a change. A lot of wincing, maybe, but no change.
Well, yes, the star seed adults are going to have to become numerous enough and move into positions of power to make a difference. I would argue that some of them are already in sort of position, but not out of the closet yet.
So you see that going on.
Well made.
You see that going on now, then?
Yeah, there
subtly.
are quietly some starseed adults in certain positions of influence in the culture, and some of the experiencers who've had encounters are talking up about their encounters, including some celebrities. We've had Shirley MacLaine talk about her encounters, for example, and try to normalize it. And Roxanne Barr, I was on her program when she came out of the closet about her own experience when she was doing a program on that for those in the audience who've had experiences. And there have been others. Many stars are willing to say they've seen a UFO and they think this thing is real.
Yes.
But in terms of people changing fundamentally the value system by which nations and the global society operate, I would agree with you, we're not there yet, but I think there are many people in the wings who are ready to step forward.
Doctor, there's a lot of Bobs out there, and, when we look at what's going on objectively in the world right now, and we look at the timeline, and the timeline of the apparent star seed situation, it doesn't look like the timeline is fitting. It doesn't look like there's going to be movement fast enough to prevent our own extinction. It really doesn't look that way now.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to speed it up.
Well, right. And you've got some background in the speeding up dynamics in your book, which I found most interesting. Personally, and my Native American shaman friends concur that 2012 is not only an interesting date on the Mayan calendar, but pretty much the window by which we need to make changes. That's only 9 years out. Looking at it just from the perspective of the way we normally time we take to make changes in our society across the board, it doesn't look like even with the avalanche of star kids coming in now that things are going to change fast enough. But the wild card in the deck that is rising to the top rapidly is made up of two things: the Earth changes and the star visitors' presence coming out in the open. Now, by Earth changes, I'm sure your listeners are all well aware of what that means. But if there's some new people tuning in, let me just summarize it by saying this is sort of shorthand for a series of very major global tumults that will shake up society as we know it, already starting to happen, but will get more intense apparently over the next 3 years, is the timeline I've been told. We're talking about everything from major earthquakes to tidal waves to volcanoes going off, illnesses getting out there, but also social and political upheavals, wars, famines, pestilence. You and your associate writer did a book on the superstorm.
Yes, sir.
That
is about to be a movie, by the way, called The Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah, I saw the trailers for that. That's quite outstanding. It's going to come out next May. And that, I think, is based on some NASA or National Oceanic Atmospheric scientist data models using chaos theory and high-grade computer analysis, that the effects in the Earth are such now that it would take a relatively modest amount of destabilization to cascade some events. Well, it's your book. You can tell it better than I can. But why don't you quickly summarize that just as one example of how things might dramatically change almost overnight?
Oh, there are any number of ways that can occur. I mean, the Atlantic current has been destabilizing, and of course there could be a sudden change in its temperature with a resulting freezing, for example, of Europe and perhaps even a global superstorm. I mean, our weather is obviously undergoing a radical, rapid climate change period, and yeah, there's a lot. And socially, I could jump into every one of those fields and did in the quickening and point toward the global superstorm. I mean, it was a logical jump to write about, and it certainly does. Both of those books are absolutely representative of where I feel we're going right now, and so that really was my question. It was about the timeline. I just don't see anything challenging this direction for the world right now sufficiently to change its direction at all, and there's a lot of bobs out there.
Yeah. Well, let me say a word about where I think the star seed and star kid thing fits in with the Earth changes and the timeline.
Okay.
If we were just going linear, meaning using the past to predict the future, I would commit a formal act of despair, as I'm sure you would, and say, we ain't going to get there in time.
Mm-hmm.
But, as I say, the wild cards are all of these changes, both in the physical environment and in the social and political environment, that are going to destabilize the Earth, both physically and people-wise, in ways that are going to break down institutions. People aren't going to, in some cases, be able to get information the way they used to. Satellites aren't going to work. Power lines are going to be down. Some government power centers are not going to be operational, and people are going to be more on their own. In such an environment, everything is up for change and having to be jury-rigged. And what I know we were taught in grad school about crisis is that it's a wonderful opportunity for change, since people have to make the changes anyway. They're ready to look at fresh new ideas, and that is where I think the star kids and star seeds, especially the adults, are going to step into the breach and have some powerful new ways of dealing with the situation that people are going to be ready to listen to.
All right.
The other wild card is the star visitor presence coming out in the open. We've had a kind of cascade of UFO visibility over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember back 20 years ago when nobody could get a picture of a UFO. Their camera would freeze up or their video camera wouldn't work. And then after the UFO left, it will work just fine. But now people are getting miles of videotape footage of craft all over the world. Certainly the experiencers are so numerous now, there have to be in the tens of millions globally, and a number of them are bold enough to come forward and tell their experiences in public settings. And
Doctor, by percentage, how many star children or seeds know fully who they are?
Well, in my research experience, I would say that most of them know they're not standard human issue. They are different. They're not general issue. Some of them have not yet woken up to why they're different, and that's why we have these Star Kid and Star Seed adult workshops for these folks to help them understand why they're different, their abilities, what they're here for. But most of them have a sense that they're not like the rest of humans, and many of them are aware of contacts from the visitors and deduce that there is something about that is shaping them to be different. Some of them, of course, are quite crystal clear about who they are, where they came from, and why they're here and what their mission is. And most are kind of in the middle. They have some inklings, but they're still kind of fuzzy about it.
Earlier you mentioned Dr. Sitchin, Zacharias Sitchin, rather, and, his work. Do you, for the most part, buy into it?
Well, the overarching theme that the Sumerians have a historical record of contact from the stars, that they learned from star visitors that they were bioengineered, using contemporary terms, fashioned, if you will, and that they got their culture from them. And
what about the aspect that we were designed specifically to be virtual slaves, to mine gold?
Well, the problem with Sumerian literature and ancient Middle East literature in general, and I took some courses in that when I was in seminary, is that those cultures, when they talked about old times, took a lot of literary license and took a few basic facts and built interesting and colorful stories that would stick in the mind so that they could be passed down mouth to mouth over thousands of years and not be forgotten. You cannot read the Sumerian chronicles of their origin like it's the New York Times newspaper. It is much more colorful, flavored up, changed around for dramatics, and fitting within the cultural lens of the people of those times. Their culture was...
So then are you suggesting, Doctor, that it's literary license? The gold part?
Well, I'm saying it's not at all clear to what degree some of the aspects of the details of that chronicle of the interaction between the visitors and the proto-humans was, as Sitchin is laying out the literal translation of it, but I'm saying that is not the same as a history book. It is a literary, colorful storytelling. It may be, for example, that the star visitor group that was involved with the Sumerians did that first iteration of Homo sapiens, still pretty primitive, and about all they were good for was heavy lifting. They weren't very bright, and this is about 275,000 years ago, and so if they helped out in hauling stuff out of the mines, whatever. Then, after allowing evolution to go on for a while, being clear that they needed an upgrading about 130,000 years ago, they did a genetic improvement, Homo sapiens sapiens, modern humans, and at that point, the intelligence level was such that it would not be appropriate to see them as a beast of burden type animal.
Well, you understand why I asked you that question, because, I mean, we're constantly looking to their, if they are our designers, their motivation. And if it is benign, it's benign. But if it's, if we were slaves, then it perhaps was not at that time as benign as we would have liked it to have been. Or maybe, as you're suggesting, that's literary license in the way the story came forward.
Well, I think there's certainly a lot of literary coloration in the story, and knowing the way literature in that time is written and the cultural lens it's written from, I think we have to approach the high details with caution. That was a very vertical society. The king strongman ruled. Everybody else was essentially higher or lesser grades of serfs or slaves. That's how they saw society, and any story of interaction in their history is going to be told with that kind of perspective. In anthropology, we call that culture-bound thinking. It's hard to see reality outside of your own culture you're inside of. So I think the caution signals are up about taking every last detail as literal fact.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I think the primitiveness of Homo sapiens versus the higher intelligence and sophistication of Homo sapiens sapiens, modern man, suggests that the earlier version was less capable and may have needed more direction to find its place.
Mm-hmm. In your research, at some point you got diverted enough to go out actually yourself to Area 51. Is that correct?
Yes, I've been out there a number of times.
Not far from my house, as you know.
Yes, good old Perron.
Oh, yes. So what did you see there?
Well, the first time I went by there, I really feel it was guided, my timing. I happened upon some test flights of anti-gravity craft. This was April 1992. And I approached there in the afternoon, and the good old Wackenhut guards were not pleased by my approach, and my rear left tire got shot out. So I had to limp back and into the highway and do a tire change.
They shot your tire out.
Well, there were two of them, and when I drove by, my tire explosively decompressed, and it was not a
rock.
This is flat desert, and this was not something I ran over. This is a sidewall rupture with violent decompression. I draw the inference that's what they did. The tumbleweed didn't do it.
But you saw anti-gravity craft. You're sure?
That night I came back with lights out and pulled back there and used binoculars, and I saw one at a time 5 different ships rise vertically out of Area 51 above the ridge line of the Groom Mountain Range.
Yes.
These were discoid-shaped craft with a glowing orangish, reddish, goldish kind of ionization field all the way around them. They're very intense glow. Sit there hovering, and then after a bit slowly start tracking downrange at a constant altitude, maybe 30 miles an hour, which, as you know, is not a Piper Cub stall speed.
Doctor, I've seen them myself.
Yes, you know how it goes.
I do, and they're real. Do you believe them?
These are U.S., by the way, and not extraterrestrial craft.
You believe they're U.S. craft, test craft?
Yes.
Using our technology, Doctor?
Made by Northrop Aerospace.
With our technology only?
No, copycatted from extraterrestrial technology.
Back engineered?
Yes.
The phone lines here are ringing with an obvious urgency. So I know there are a lot of people who want to speak to Dr. Boylan, and surely we will get to that. But, boy, we've got a lot of material. We really do to cover. Dr. Boylan, an eyewitness at Area 51. Doctor, I've interviewed Dr. Greer many times, and it's his feeling that we've actually shot, that our military has shot at UFOs. And I know you've written the government is violating the Treaty Against Weapons in Space. What are we doing?
Well, yes. I think it's STS-48, that famous videotape that the astronaut shot from space of a bogey, unidentified flying object out at the edge of Earth's atmosphere. And what...
I believe you're referring to that item NASA calls a hunk of ice.
Yeah, well, very interesting piece of ice that suddenly does a 90-degree turn and accelerates.
It is, indeed.
Yeah. And what comes up from Earth towards it is a neutral particle beam Star Wars weapon blast.
It sure looks like it.
And those neutral particle beams accelerate at roughly the speed of light, just slightly below, with a little bit of Earth's atmosphere slowing, but pretty darn fast. In other words, folks, we're talking as fast as radio waves come at you from Art Bell Station.
Mm.
And this UFO dodges and misses the bullets coming at the speed of light towards it. You've got to figure the technology of these folks that they can detect incoming far enough ahead at the speed of light to make a evasive maneuver and get out of the line of fire. This is not a piece of frozen urine from one of the astronauts, I want to assure you.
Mm. Well, you wouldn't think they'd regard that as a warm welcome or a thank you or anything?
No. There are, and I have multiple sources, including Command Sergeant Major Bob Dean and another gentleman who used to work for the Army General who first headed up the Army Space Command, that we have in orbit right now particle beam weapons, killer lasers, and electromagnetic pulse weapons. These are weapons who can emit a swamping, overwhelming force field that will fry any electronics.
Uh-huh. I believe that, and that clearly violates the treaty.
Yes, we are signatories. The U.S. is a signatory, along with most civilized nations, to a treaty saying we will not place weapons in space. Well, we signed that treaty, but behind people's backs, we've ignored it, and our military have gone up there and placed orbiting weapon systems in space, and they are directed not only to interdict intercontinental ballistic missiles, but also occasionally target incoming star visitor vessels. And some have been shot down. Leah Haley, who I believe you certainly know and may have had on your program earlier.
Indeed.
Is an eyewitness to a shoot-down because she was on board an extraterrestrial craft when it was shot down near Gulf Breeze, Florida, in the Panhandle. And to refresh our listeners' memory, she was on board with some other humans who were having an encounter with the visitors when a portable electromagnetic cannon was placed on the near the beach, and the military knew ahead of time. They'd been reconnaissancing, I guess, these experiencers who had repeated visits, and they knew when the visitors were coming for them, and had a cannon along the line of path of the craft and shot it down. It landed hard on the sand. Some of the people inside were injured, and some were still okay. Leo is one of those okay. A offshore Navy vessel pulled up I forget if it was Navy SEALs or Delta Force came up, surrounded the craft, pulled Leah and some other humans and the star visitors out of there, put them aboard a craft ship, took them out to the main vessel out there on the sea, and away they went.
When that happens to the United States, Doctor, we call it an act of war.
Right. And part of the reason I think Jacobs and the crowd that look paranoidally as the visitors as an invasion force, they've had ever so many of these provocations that if it were another Earth nation would say, well, you can't do that to us, that's an act of war. But these people turn the other cheek repeatedly because, like I say, they're here as a Peace Corps to try and get us to straighten up and fly right, and they're hardly wanting to add to the violence and aggression going on. They see plenty enough of that going on Earth without any outside help. And so we do have this stuff both on Earth, stationed on Earth, pointing upward, and in space, pointing down and out.
And you believe their attitude to be one of turn the other cheek?
Yes, they've been fired on so many times, and they use their technology to evade.
Okay.
The one recorded incident, I think, of a military jet going down was decades earlier. I think it was an Iranian Air Force plane engaged a UFO.
That's right.
Did lock on with radar lock on and rockets ready to go. And the visitors on board that craft decided to deal with the F-16 not by shooting it down, but by, I guess they swamped its electronics so everything died on the plane. Of course, modern jets, once the electronics don't work, they're hardly airworthy.
They're
drop pretty fast.
Rocks.
And so that one went down. I think they've learned since that that's not a good nonviolent way to deal with a firing situation. Usually they just do a do-si-do and dodge real fast. But that's about the only incident I can think of a, it's not even a shoot down, it's just a nonviolent dealing with a military jet that caused a crash. And this is over thousands of engagements of military fighters with UFOs in which they've just gone away or gotten invisible or do-si-doed and got out of the line of fire. So we're clearly not dealing with the warlike people that are looking for an excuse to blow us out of the water, because they've had plenty of those excuses and have not done so.
All right. In the past, you and I have spent a lot of time, and it's an obvious path to take when you talk about their being our creators, to talk of the church and talk of God and talk of the Bible. But instead of going down that road tonight, since we've been down it, there have been statements made by Monsignor Balducci, and I understand you may have more on that. He kind of rocked the Vatican world, didn't he?
That would be a mild statement, yes. And furthermore, he's kind of hanging out there, and may I say the Pope is letting him hang out there kind of by himself. There's not a whole lot of other clergy over in Rome that are going out public with this, but he has. I had the honor...
You might say he's twisting in the Vatican breeze.
Yes, that would not be unfair characterization of it all. I had the pleasure of going over there December of 2002 and meeting with Monsignor Balducci, and he graciously took us upstairs to his house, and he lives within very easy eye shot of the Vatican, and we had a very long evening of discussion. He was just finishing a paper he was writing on UFOs and the star visitors, how this is consistent with church teachings. It doesn't represent any problem for the church. It's not forbidden by the Bible or anything else. It's consistent with what, in fact, he'd spent a lot of time saying that the early church fathers, teachers and bishops and theologians said that there is life out there and that that's not a problem, that God made all the people on all the planets, and if I may be colloquial, no big deal, take a deep breath and live with it. This is not the kind of stuff you hear from your Sunday pulpit, but it is what Monsignor is being allowed to say in Italy. And may I say that the big man, Pope John Paul II, even on one occasion squeaked out a comment of his own. He was asked during a audience by one of the people there, Holy Father, but what about the extraterrestrials? And his cryptic answer was, we have to remember they are God's children too. He didn't say what extraterrestrials or, they are of Satan. He just said, we have to remember they're God's children too.
Can you recall the occasion upon which he said that?
It was during an audience. It was several years ago, maybe 5 or 6 now. I don't have the town.
To come back that affirmatively with that sort of, wow.
But while Balducci says, just for those of our audience who aren't 100% up on Balducci, he says they're not demonic. People who report them are not crazy. These encounters deserve to be studied carefully. These visitors are obviously more advanced than humans. Actually, he personally kind of puts them halfway between humans and angels, some of them in their spiritual development. But the Pope, at least, while he doesn't go public and say, Balducci's right, he's my man, he at least, when cornered himself, says, we have to remember they're God's children too, which is a statement of affirmation and not denial.
It certainly is. It certainly is. All right. I'm going to turn a question around on you here. We have these written questions for the show, folks, and sometimes I follow them. More times I don't. But this one's kind of interesting. Questions I might ask, of Dr. Boylan. You're reported to have said that some of the famous UFO investigators out there are not qualified to make statements they make about abductions. What do you mean by that, and who are some of these investigators you feel are unqualified? Now, I'm not going to ask that. Instead, I'm going to ask you, there is, in ufology and in your field, our field, I guess, in general, there is more fighting that goes on generally on an NFL Sunday football game. I mean, it just is, it's rough out there. Ufology is small anyway, and in its ranks, they're ripping each other to shreds. What's going on?
Well, several things. And I would speak for the few naive people in the audience because you know this, Art. First of all, it's no accident that there's a lot of turmoil. Billions of dollars are being spent to make sure that there's plenty of turmoil in this field.
Oh, you think it's orchestrated?
Some of it. Not only the disinformation boys active, but I've had them do it to me, and I've had them do it to other solid researchers. They go up to you and say, do you know what that other guy just said about you? I think you should know this. And then he goes up to the other person and says, you know what Boylan said about you? I think you should know this. They play the let's you and him fight game.
Yes.
And they do that in print. I've had them ask me questions on email and then take it out of context and shove it in the other person's face and he's saying dirt about you, hoping that they'll say something bad back about me, and that
So we'll you've been involved in more than your share of these little brawls.
Yeah. Also, I mean, there's that stuff going on, and that's your tax dollars at work.
Right.
Then, of course, there's human nature. You remember that, Art. And ego, pettiness, competition tendencies exist in the UFO field like they exist in the rest of human society. Plus, you've got what I think John Mack has described very well, and I certainly agree with him. With the UFO subject, we have a subject of cosmic importance, and the star visitor contact with humanity, a subject of transcendent importance.
Agreed.
If this stuff is true, it is the biggest story that has ever been told.
Agreed.
Okay. you get Joe Sixpack out there who went to a MUFON meeting and got a card. Now he's a UFO expert. Just using an illustration here, comes to a meeting and, he has his own personal opinions and somebody else says something different, and he feels this subject is too important to let this other jerk get away with his ignorance, and so he feels the need to get up and verbally beat him up at things.
Yes.
This kind of stuff goes on. So between the orchestrated, deliberate provocation stuff that the Cabal boys, the UFO cover-up organization operatives are doing, there's plenty enough human nature. Given the importance of this subject, people tend to get grandiose and assume that it's important, therefore I'm important. If I talk about it, therefore nobody else better get in my way. And you've got the recipe for a Donnybrook.
Yep. Well, they go on so frequently that ufology, already having a pretty tough time getting taken seriously, has even yet more problems. How much do you attribute to an orchestration by people with money? How much of it is that? And if that were to stop, what percentage of the fighting would stop? Same question, I guess.
Well, if we took all the disinformation away and what people like Dr. Michael Wolff and the National Security Council Subcommittee for Management of the UFO matter, if the level of information they know were out there in public with no lies, deceit, denials, and distortion, just 100% out there as the fact base, society would be pretty much at one because we'd all be starting from the same page. Then we'd just have some discussion about how that affects you and me and the person down the street, but we would not have so much differences. There would still be, given the cosmic importance of this issue, people taking their positions, but I think a whole lot of the Donnybrook would settle down. What we need is leadership that is not being sabotaged. There are, as you know, certain people in this field who stand above others
yes,
with credibility, dignity, and consistent, clear, non-combative statements of position. Somebody like Bob Dean comes to mind.
I do want to mention that Dr. Boylan has a website, which we have a link for, of course, coastcoastam.com, would take you to www.drboylan, that's BOYLAN.com, drboylan.com, drboylan.com. And he also has 3 books, Close Extraterrestrial Encounters, Labored Journey to the Stars, and Project Epiphany.